just read another article on Debka File, Debka, DEBKA.com. Russia vies with Israel over aid for Quneitra. Now, folks, this is the first time in history that Russia has gone down into Syria on the border of Israel and trying to take hegemony in the Middle East. Now, they have thought about doing it before. They planned on doing it before. But this is the first time they've ever made this attempt. And this article is incredible. Who knows just how low Russia will stoop to get hegemony in the Middle East? Let me read this article. As Russian troops begin moving into Quneitra ceasefire sector opposite Israel's Golan border on Wednesday, July the 19th, they found that they were in hot competition with Israel. Oh, come on, folks. They didn't find out. It was deliberate. They want to take what is rightfully belonging to Israel away from them. That is hegemony in the Middle East. The Middle East belongs to Israel. Over humanitarian aid for the sector's rebel-held villages. Since Israel is adamantly opposed to the Russian presence in the Quneitra demilitarized zone, although it was endorsed by the Trump administration, as Debka File reported exclusively on Tuesday, July 18th, Moscow decided to take it slowly and meanwhile try and win over the Syrian rebel groups whom Israel has succored over the years, for years. The Kremlin figured that if these anti-Assad groups could be weaned away from Israel, they might be persuaded to cooperate with the Russian troops in setting up the Quneitra ceasefire zone, and Russians would not need Israel's compliance. You can see where this is going now, can't you? On Tuesday, therefore, a Russian military convoy drove into Jabba, a village northeast of Quneitra town and 4 kilometers from Israel's Golan border. Officers described as belonging to the Russian Defense Ministry Reconciliation Center alit from the trucks and began handing out food packages to the villagers. The civilians received necessities and were treated by Russian doctors. A Syrian officer announced Russian and Syrian officers promised that more humanitarian aid would be delivered to settlements across the Quneitra province, and Russian doctors would visit all the villages in the ceasefire zone. Israel, who had been sending aid across these Syrian villages, which were cut off by the civil war from basic necessities, had mostly kept its humanitarian program under wraps, except when witnesses reported what they saw to the media. So basically, Israel was very quiet about helping these groups, while Russia and Syria is proclaiming how wonderful and how righteous they are to the whole world. Incredible. Where were the Russians all these years when Israel alone helped the beleaguered villages across its border? After watching the Russian troops hand out packages to the people of Quneitra, the Israeli government and military chiefs decided to challenge the Russians' belated propaganda move. Up until now, Israel has supplied regular humanitarian aid to some 200,000 Syrian villagers living in 80 non-ISIS rebel-controlled villages, 15 kilometers deep inside the Syrian Golan. Last year alone, Israel sent over 500,000 liters of heavy fuel, 360 tons of foodstuff, 77 tons of clothing and shoes, tens of generators and water systems, as well as providing them with medical treatment including hospital care for sick and injured Syrians and a field hospital on the border. Wednesday, Israel formalized its assistance program under the title The Good Neighbor and disclosed it had been administered since 2016 by a special unit of the Bashan Division, which is in charge of the Golan sector. The IDF released footage of trucks ferrying across the border supplies of medical equipment, medicines, foodstuff, and fuel, as well as pictures documenting IDF medics lifting injured Syrians off the battlefield for treatment in Israeli hospitals. According to the IDF statistics, at least 3,000 Syrians crossed the border in the past 4 years for medical treatment. And Israel sent over, as needed, incubators, respirators, and ambulances. In the same period, the IDF conducted 150 assistance operations on Syrian soil. On their arrival in Quneitra, the Russians found a population that was better fed and cared for than Syrian civilians on any of the other countries' war fronts. They are nonetheless challenging Israel for the locals' hearts and minds. One more proof that Russia is trying to take over hegemony in the Middle East and trying to push Israel out of the equation. Another failed effort on the part of Russia in the making. Shame on you, Russia. Shame on you, Vladimir Putin, and shame on the entire Russian government.